Treasury forecasting on the one hand that we could see a peak of 10% by the end of the June quarter. As you've been saying all through this morning, it's not just that actual nominal unemployment rate, it's underemployment. But importantly, what the likes of the central agencies like the Reserve Bank are actually looking for in today's numbers are the total hours worked. And if those fall significantly, and I think the RBA is forecasting that could fall by as much as 20%, that will be obviously the serious concern. If that continues to sort of compound over the coming months, that will really lead us to sort of rethink how high this could go. But 10% at the moment is as high as most economic forecasters are suggesting it'll go.
Yeah, I mean it's dire any way you look at it, and it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, when the September quarter ends, James, I mean, are you forecasting problems then when JobKeeper and JobSeeker, those additions start to be wound back?
Yeah, this is the big... I mean, obviously, for the federal government, it's going to be managing the health aspects of this crisis and the possible future outbreaks. But as you say, Pete, the stimulus coming out of the economy at the end of September quarter, JobSeeker being scaled back to the original Newstart is the current plan the government has. The government's already considering potentially rolling back JobKeeper in certain sectors because it's obviously the take-up's been quite high. So when you have that almost that investment and demand cliff coming at the end of September quarter, we're going to have to sort of see probably some other stimulus plans from the government, probably on infrastructure and some shovel-ready projects to sort of add that demand and smooth out that impact of that cliff that's coming at the end of September quarter.
Well, what of the Morrison government's handling of COVID? You know, what challenges, in your opinion, remain?
Yeah, look, I think that's the main one. We're seeing already, interestingly, Sydney CBD's anything to go by, Pete. The message just sort of seems to be out there now that things can almost go back to normal. So there are some emerging risks, particularly with outbreaks, and we're going to sort of see more crowded, pubs and restaurants, as you've been reporting today, as we get those restrictions coming off. So managing the outbreak is going to be a continuing pressure on the government, but then in particular this economic recovery, which is not just going to be about today's data or the end of the September quarter. It's going to be what are the plans to bring the economy back to that proper trend growth of between 3% and 4%, of decent wages growth, of fairness in the economy. And that's really a plan for the medium term, for the next 12, 18 months and 2 years. So it's going to be, it's the short term and it's the long term for the federal government. There's a lot of challenges.
Well, speaking of dire warnings, what did you make of those comments from Matt Comyn yesterday that suggested that, real estate prices could drop 30% over the next few years?
Yeah, look, I think that's probably a bit of an outlier of a concern and some fairly dire assumptions underpinning such a significant fall. I suppose the equation for the housing market is, on the one hand, yes, we do have unemployment rising. We know that we've got that low net overseas migration, particularly for the next 12 months or so, and migration is an important demand factor when it comes to housing. But on the other hand, Pete, we've also got record low interest rates. We've got, it's never been a better time, if you have a full-time job, to actually get into the housing market. We've got interest rates near 0%. So that's almost a bit of a flaw when it comes to house prices. Yes, we'd expect to see a bit of a fall and a levelling out. 30%, I think, would have to be a significant and prolonged economic downturn to get that sort of number.
Just back on the reopening of pubs and clubs and restaurants and what have you. I mean, I think a lot of businesses still aren't going to open tomorrow, whether it's a pub or not, because 10 patrons, it's just not worth their while economically. But the Premier was at pains today to suggest for those businesses who do proceed tomorrow, people do need to take care. Even when they're standing out the front, they shouldn't queue. There should be 1.5 metres. I mean, this is the new norm, right? I mean, social distancing is the way forward for this to work.
It is, and I think there's going to be an ongoing communications goal and objective for government here to get that balance right. People want to go back to normal. I don't know about you, Pete. I'm hankering to get and have a nice cafe breakfast. But if we're going to have situations where there's 10, 20, 30 people lining up outside a cafe or a restaurant with 10 people inside, you can see the obvious risks and concerns in terms of that virus spreading. So it's just going to be, I think, a bit of a wait and see how this sort of first phase of easing goes. Look, at least we've bought time, and the health authorities, through this good management, have bought time through the testing and the ability to be able to localise and trace where the virus and how the virus is spreading, that if there is a secondary outbreak, they can get on top of it nice and quickly.